Hey there, I am just making a quick little video on my little pregnancy journey. Um, After viewing a few videos, I've gotten the courage a little bit to talk about my current situation. It's not actually out there a lot for women that go through it, and it's hard when you're going through it by yourself or even with your significant other. It's hard when you feel like you're in it alone, or if you feel like there's not enough information out there, or when you Google or you look things up, there's just not a lot of information out there. And one of the main things that kind of prompted me to do this, because I had no intentions on documenting at all anything but my pregnancy, other than the pictures here, pictures there, with family. It kind of just It's been taking a toll on me lately, because it kind of makes me feel like, well, gee, this is not the envision that I had when I wanted to be pregnant or got pregnant, or we found out we were pregnant. We had all these big plans on prepping and shopping and all that fun stuff, and finding out that I have an incompetent cervix put a damper on everything. I'm currently 25 weeks pregnant today. I've been going back and forth between my doctor's office and the hospital that I'm supposed to deliver at since my 21-week anatomy scan. So yeah, I found out I had honestly, when I had my anatomy scan, I believe that appointment was December 12th. They actually did the anatomy scan. The scan itself was probably a good 45 minutes or so. Then at the end, or at the beginning of that scan, she checked my cervix to check my length of my cervix. Didn't mention anything to me. Thought everything was great. Unfortunately, my little girl was head down, spine up, so they couldn't really get all of the views that they needed for the anatomy scan. So I knew I would have to go back eventually to complete it. But they finished the rest of the anatomy scan, told me everything was great, okay, you can get off the table. Gave me a towel and told me I can go in the restroom, wipe off, clean up, and come on out when I was finished. Well, when I came out, my boyfriend sitting there, he was like, oh, the ultrasound tech said, wait a few minutes, they're going to send the doctor in. In that moment, I knew something was wrong, because that day that we did our anatomy scan was just our ultrasound. I didn't have an appointment to see my actual doctor until Friday, and we were at a totally different office than I usually go to for my appointments. So when they told him that, I knew something was wrong. But my boyfriend tried to reassure me. No, nothing was wrong. She said that everything's fine. She just wants to send the doctor in really quick. So, of course, I'm sitting there, and it's taking what feels like forever for the doctor to come in. And, yeah, the doctor comes in, and he introduces himself, and he's like, so, you're not having any bleeding, cramping, discharge, anything like that? I'm like, no, everything's fine. Everything's been going fine. Haven't had any problems. He was like, well, that's odd, because your cervix is open. I mean, I tried to stay calm, of course, but I about lost my shit. Sorry for the language. And I was just like, what? And he was like, yeah, your cervix is open, and it's showing that you're about 2 centimeters dilated. So we're sending you over to the hospital to labor and delivery. They're going to admit you. They already know you're coming. Just head straight over there, and they'll take care of you from there, and we'll kind of see where you're at. Mind you, this was at 21 weeks, which pregnancy isn't viable till 24 weeks. So I'm freaking out. My boyfriend's trying to stay calm while he's driving. Of course, we hit every light, freaking every stop, traffic. It was just the utmost worst scenario of getting somewhere fast that you could run into. It felt like it took us an hour to get to the hospital from my doctor's office. So, we get there, and of course, I go to labor and delivery. For some odd reason, the lady that was there didn't know what she was talking about. She sent me to the emergency room. The emergency room sent me back to labor and delivery. It was just a nightmare. And so by the time we get back there, they're going over all this, and then they repeat my ultrasound, and come to find out, my cervix was not open, thank goodness, and I was not dilated. My cervix is short. And so the initial visit that the measurements that they got while I was at the hospital, sorry, I'm just reading my little notes here, showed that my cervix was at 1.2 centimeters, and this was at 21 weeks on December 12th. Of course, they wanted anywhere above 2.5 and higher, centimeter-wise for your cervix length. So I was already out of that ballpark. They did talk to me a hot second about cerclage, but seeing how my cervix was still closed, it wasn't below 1 centimeter. They were hoping to just keep me on bed rest, follow up in a week, and then I wouldn't need the cerclage, hopefully, ever going forward. So I ended up getting discharged on bed rest, of course. While I was in the hospital, of course, they monitored the baby. She's doing great. She still is doing great. Moving, heart rate was great. Everything was fine. They sent me home, like I said, on bed rest, told me to follow up that following week for a repeat ultrasound and to make sure I follow up with my doctor. At this point, they had recommended me following up with a high-risk pregnancy team, which I was planning on going to see them, but in the midst of everything, I found out they didn't take my insurance, and I would have to be paying everything out of pocket on top of all of this. So before I got discharged, the doctor that I saw in the hospital, he worked with the high-risk group, and he said, at this point, we'll just keep you following up with your OB, and you'll just come here for your repeat ultrasounds weekly at the hospital, and then we'll just work with your OB, so that way you're not having to reestablish with a whole new team when we're already here at the same hospital that your OB is networked through and that you'll be delivering through. If anything happens preterm, we'll all be in the loop still. So I was really happy about that. That was kind of probably the best outcome on that scenario. Because the worst thing is, okay, I'm 21 weeks pregnant. I've been following my OB this whole time. I've had previous pregnancies where I've miscarried early at 6-7 weeks, which isn't related to the incompetent cervix, but this is the furthest that I've ever gotten. And I was really just trying to stay positive and trying to take their information and go with it. So fast forward to the next week, I had my repeat ultrasound on the 18th at the hospital. Her heart rate was still at 153, which is good. Her heart rate's been in the 150s the last month, I think, actually. And they told me that my cervix dropped to 1.1, which was not bad, 0.1 centimeter drop. They're like, we're going to keep you on bed rest. You're not going back to work, which is frustrating to me, seeing how I've never been not working. So that was hard. But yes, keep me off work, bed rest, no heavy lifting. You can get up and go to the restroom. You can, make you something to eat, but you don't want to be on your feet no longer than 10 or 15 minutes at a time. You can take showers, every 2 days or every other day. But your main place is going to be bed rest, strict bed rest. No ifs, ands, or buts, unfortunately. I'm fine with that. It's like whatever to keep her growing and healthy. Whatever I have to do it. And no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm just going to do it. So, we've been trucking along, making our appointments. So far, so good. I haven't had any pain other than, the usual discomfort with how you're laying or, back pain here or there. No cramping, still no bleeding, no discharge. I was given progesterone suppositories, which I've been using faithfully. I've been taking still my prenatals. I do have a history of low iron, so I've been taking an extra iron supplement, folic acid, vitamin B12, and just trying to stay hydrated. I'm will not lie. I am the worst at drinking water. I always have been, but since I've been pregnant, I've been trying to be a lot better at drinking water. Unfortunately, that did not help me fast forwarding a week. So my next appointment, or my next ultrasound, was going to be on the 26th. So I had my last ultrasound December 18th, and then I seen my doctor on the 19th, which she was just doing a general checkup after I got discharged from the hospital that first go round. And I actually seen her while I was in the hospital as well. She happened to be on call when I got admitted. So seeing familiar faces during all of this definitely helped, but it was still very nerve-wracking. The only questions you can really think of is why me? Like, you see, your friends or your family pregnant and everything's going great. No one wants to share these stories. So it may look great, but you never know who's going through these scenarios on the back end of things. And you can't always think, why me? All you can think of is, I'm going to get through this. I have faith that my baby girl will be here healthy in due time. So fast forwarding, like I said, to Wednesday, when did we have our following? We had our next ultrasound on Wednesday, December 26th. It was the day after Christmas. And that appointment didn't go so well. So we went in. I think our appointment was around 11:30. And we had our ultrasound, and at that point, my cervix was measuring at 0.9 millimeters. So I went from a 1.2, a 1.1 to a 0.9 millimeters. So I did remember that the doctor told me in the hospital that once it got below 1 centimeter, that they would admit me, give me some shots for steroids for the baby's lungs to mature, and monitor me for contractions. So I did remember that. So when she was doing the ultrasound, of course she had the screen blacked out to where I couldn't see what she was typing, which I like to look at those numbers because I'm in the medical field too, and so those are kind of my cheats to kind of see, if things changed, anything like that. But because she had it blacked out, I couldn't really see what she was typing. The general view of my cervix looked about the same, but again, I couldn't see anything to know for sure, like, where my numbers were. So of course I had to wait. After the ultrasound, she had me stay in the room with my boyfriend, and we kind of just sat there and kind of talked about things, like, hopefully everything is stable, we get to go home, get back on bed rest. We were talking about what we're going to eat for lunch, yada, yada, yada. Well, then the doctor comes in, and he was like, so remember the conversation we had that if you were below 1, I would admit you for evaluation, overnight stay, yada, yada, yada. And I was just like, yep, I remember. He was like, well, now you're at 0.9. So I'm about to send you back over to labor and delivery. They're going to admit you, and you're probably going to be here for a good 2 days or so. Of course, it wasn't the news I wanted to hear, but we have already kind of addressed the conversations of what was going to happen, so I was prepared. The biggest thing is ask questions. Like, there's never a dumb question with pregnancy because every woman's body is different. You go through things differently. Your body is different than the next pregnant woman's body. Your cervix is different. There's never 2 pregnancies that are the same. And I'm learning that, to not assume that I know the answers. My boyfriend actually points it out to me all the time to let them explain and make sure we ask questions, because you just never know. And if you don't ask, you won't know. So I basically just had him remap the plan out to me, and he was like, so at this point, we are going to go ahead and admit you, and we're going to keep you tonight for sure. We're going to get you started with your first dose of steroids. And we're going to get you on a monitor to check for contractions, and check the baby's heart rate, make sure everything's good, and then yes, we are definitely keeping you. And I was like, okay, perfect. I mean, he was like, at this point, your cervix is still closed, so we're not considering the cerclage. There's a lot of pros and cons with the cerclage. The most con is with the risk of infection. And since your cervix is closed, you're not bleeding, you're not leaking any amniotic fluid, there's no reason to push through your closed cervix to put in a cerclage. At this point, your cervix is still closed. At this point, this is what we are planning to do to protect you from getting an infection, for the baby being anything ruptured, because there's always a case too with doing the cerclage is they can break your water. And I mean, at that point, it starts, the active labor can start at any time once your water breaks. So those are always the risks that he kept trying to go over with me on why we weren't doing the cerclage, which I really appreciate, because yes, I agree with my cervix still being closed. I didn't see the benefits of them pushing through my closed cervix to put a stitch in to push my membranes back further to try to lengthen my cervix. So to me, that made sense, because I didn't want the risk of infection opening my cervix when right now it's currently closed and it's holding, so I totally agreed with that. So yes, they admitted me. Like I said, I got the first steroid shot. I ended up staying there the 26th, and I was discharged on the 29th of December. I had my 2 doses of steroids. While I was on the monitor before they admitted me, I was having contractions and didn't know it. I wasn't in any pain. I didn't feel them, which they were concerned about as well. And I was also dehydrated, which, again, I didn't feel like I was dehydrated. I actually had drank 2 or 3 bottles of water before I even went into the ultrasound. So, again, just because you're not having any of the symptoms, any of the other symptoms, if anything does feel out of the ordinary, you're unsure, it doesn't hurt to ask. So yeah, I got the 2 steroid shots. Sorry, I keep repeating myself. 2 steroid shots. They gave me some indocin, which helped with the contractions, to stop the contractions. They gave me IV fluid to help with the dehydration, because they think that's what was linked to me possibly having the contractions. It's any type of dehydration, you can start to have contractions. So first night, that was that night. The second day, I got the second dose of steroids, and I continued the indocin every 6 hours, my full stay. And then by the third day, I was done with, they didn't do any more steroids. They didn't do any more of the contraction medication. Or the third day was the last day of the contraction medication. They usually do that for 72 hours. So I finished that, and then they monitored me my last day there. I wasn't having any contractions. There was no change. They did a FFN test, which basically just checks the cervix to make sure you're not leaking any amniotic fluid. But they can only do that test at 24 weeks. So, like I said, this was my 3rd ultrasound since my 21st week anatomy scan. So at this point, the day that I was getting discharged, I was 24 weeks. So they went ahead and did that test, which was just a swab of the cervix, and it came back negative. So that just confirmed that my cervix was still closed. I still wasn't leaking any amniotic fluid, still no cramping, still no bleeding. So at that point, they wrote up my discharge and told me that I can go home, but I was still on complete strict bed rest. Same guidelines, restroom, I can make me something to eat. But other than that, I was to be in the bed. So with all of this going on, I may sound calm and more receptive to it now, but the first night, I was just in awe. I couldn't believe that all of this was happening. Why me? Like, I felt robbed of the experience of being a first-time mom. it was a lot. And of course, my boyfriend, he's trying to be very supportive. He's trying to hold it together for me because he sees that I'm not strong right now. And so he's trying to be strong, but I can see that he's hurting. It was just so much emotion and so much going on that the first week of all of this going on, it took a lot out of us. And it honestly wasn't for our families, both his family and my family, coming together and just trying to make us see that everything's going to be fine. You just have to make sure you keep you on bed rest, following what the doctor says, making sure you're eating and drinking. Everything will be fine, which we've kept that mindset this whole time. And it's helped because here I am, 25 weeks. Still no cerclage, still not dilated, cervix is still closed. Last week I did have my last ultrasound that I'm going to have vaginally to check the cervix. That ultrasound, it did come back lower than the 0.9 millimeters. It came back at 0.6 millimeters. But my doctor did the hospital doctor did tell me that once you hit 24 weeks, your cervix length changes a lot between the positioning of the baby and the growth of the uterus preparing for birth. So he said at this point, they won't be doing any more vaginal ultrasounds. The only thing that they will be doing to check my cervix between now and birth is a pelvic exam. And if I do have any abnormal discharge or leakage or bleeding, they will do another FFN test to check for amniotic fluid leakage. But at this point, they are happy with my cervix still being closed. Even though the readings are saying 6 millimeters, he said that can change depending on, if you've used the restroom before the ultrasound, depending on how the baby is positioned, if they're head down, feet down. Any tension from the baby itself can cause different readings on the uterus after 24 weeks. So that gave me the utmost joy when he gave me that information. So I was really happy because when they came in after the ultrasound last week, I was like, oh, I'm going to have to get readmitted. And I was just like, well, I had already packed my bag just in case. I was like, it is what it is. My boyfriend put the bag in the car just in case so he didn't have to run back and try to pack it and bring it back. Yeah. So we were kind of prepared, but that definitely was a relief of information that we got. And at this point, I'm still on bed rest. I've been off of work since December 12th, which is hard because, of course, you're planning always to, use your disability and FMLA up until, when you have the baby to stay with the baby afterwards. So this just kind of throws a wrench in everything, but at this point, I don't care. Like, my baby and my health is more important, and I will figure everything else out. My boyfriend has been great during this process. He has been working 2 jobs to compensate for me not working, which he does way more than I could ever say thank you for, because he has stepped to a bigger plate of just not making sure I'm okay, but our household is okay, the baby's okay, everything he has taken on outside of trying to cope with everything that I'm going through. When he sees me down and emotional, he tries to uplift me and give me that positive feedback that I really do need. Because there are days where I still feel just like, why? I still don't understand why, And I have to constantly remind myself that everything happens for a reason, and I will too get through this. I just have to be diligent with taking care of myself and watching for those warning signs. No one speaks about this stuff during pregnancy, They don't tell you about the 1 in 10 women that could have an incompetent cervix. They don't give you the statistics of what can happen outside of your normal day in, day out through pregnancy. Like, these are the conversations that aren't being had. And so when someone goes through it, you don't know how to approach someone that you're not sure if what you're experiencing is someone else experiencing. So, I mean, I'm 25 weeks today. I still feel her kicking and bouncing around in there. And it's just, I didn't expect to be here in the bed at 25 weeks, but I'm happy to be here in the bed at 25 weeks with my incompetent cervix, my bouncing baby girl that's more energetic than I am. But yes, I just wanted to kind of share my story with you guys, because every woman's not the same. Every pregnancy is not the same, and you too can make it. It's literally another threshold is week by week. So I made it to 25 weeks, and I